Welcome, friends. You are listening to the Mind Body Alchemy podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Miramontes. This is where intuition meets education in the realms of spirituality, fitness, mindset, and more, all to create lasting change. Welcome back to the podcast. Right now, we are moving into or already are in holiday season, depending on your culture, religious affiliations, geography, or whatever. Some of us are just getting there. Some of you have already experienced some holiday stuff. But wherever you are, inevitably, holidays tend to bring out the best in us and also the worst in us. And so what I really want to talk to you about today are setting boundaries and how you can avoid some of this holiday stress and overwhelm if you become a badass at doing just that, setting those boundaries. What is a boundary? A boundary is a limit or space between you and the other person, a clear place where you begin and the other person ends. The purpose of setting a healthy boundary is to protect and take good care of you as an individual. Protect your peace, protect your safety, protect your space, whatever it is. Some people have boundaries around personal space. Some people have boundaries around conversation. Some people have boundaries around their children or their home or their pets. There are a lot of ways that we set boundaries to separate what we need from what other people find acceptable to do. One thing that I think is really kind of an interesting adjunct to the whole boundary definition is the idea that a complete lack of boundaries may indicate that we don't have a strong identity or our identity is enmeshed with someone else. And we see this happen in most families when we get together. Everybody gathers around the table and all of a sudden we're talking the same, even though we kind of grew out of the family nuanced language that happens, or we're behaving the same, or, maybe we're flicking our hair the same way as we did when we were younger, these habits that we kind of move on from. When we get back together with everyone, we start behaving like the other one. And so it's really an interesting thing to observe in my family. I know that I talk a lot like my mother. When I'm around my mother, my husband brings it up all the time. I see him do it with his parents as well. It's really funny. But when we have these, and of course that's harmless, right? But when we have these strong boundaries around things that are more important to us, things like conversations that are uncomfortable or things that upset us that maybe we didn't realize were wrong or harmful or hurtful when we were growing up, now we need to take a look at those things and say, you know what? These are hard lines for me. I'm no longer comfortable with these conversations. I'm no longer comfortable being in these circumstances. And so I need to let you know that this is not okay with me. Now, here's where things get a little bit tricky. I learned just about everything I know about boundaries from Brooke Castillo, Cara Lowenthal, and Amy Smith, aka the Joy Junkie. I don't know any of them, but I listen to their podcasts. They're great podcasts. Go give them a listen. Make sure you support them. But they have all taught me different things about boundaries, and I really have started looking at them in a different way. I used to believe that a boundary was something that I gave someone else to do. You can't touch me. You need to change this behavior. You need to stop talking about these things. And in a way, you are asking people to alter their behavior. But the reality is boundaries are not about other people. They are about you, your comfort level, your behavior, what you're willing to do, what situations you are willing to be in. And so when the holidays come around and you're invited to go to family dinners and you start to rehearse all this drama in your head about what is going to happen, and very specifically, I want to talk to you guys about weight, body size, food pushing, comments about what's on your plate, eating too much, not eating enough, different ideas around diets and what that should look like. Those are things that are something that even we bond over sometimes. I know I did with my family in a lot of ways, and I no longer talk about those things. So that is specifically the area that I'm going to be diving into as we go through this podcast. The solution to ending the stress about all of this mental chatter that you get is having really strong boundaries established. And it is about what you are willing to do when you get into those situations. So the first thing that I really want you to do is to determine what you are actually stressed about. Are you stressed about comments about your body? Are you stressed about conversations that revolve around diets and food? Are you tired of being looked up and down and sort of determined whether or not people are going to praise you or be awkward around you because you gained 20 pounds? Or are you upset about the food pushing when you're trying to set limits for yourself and people just keep putting more food on your plate or making you feel guilty because this is homemade? Are you upset about the food comments that are already on your plate? Like, are you going to eat all of that? And do you really need seconds and that kind of stuff? What exactly is it that pisses you off about your family and their comments about your body and your food? But this works with anything, right? So first determine what you're stressed out about. And then I just want you to kind of work through some of that shit before you address it. I want you to understand why you're upset and then determine a desired outcome. What is your desired outcome? Do you not want to have these conversations at all ever again? If so, that's great. You need to be able to say that though. So make sure that you're really super clear first with yourself before you can start to have these conversations that are ultimately going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but need to happen in order for you to protect your peace and start looking forward to spending time with those people instead of trying to come up with excuses why you just don't want to be around your family. Then, if you can, I want you to have these conversations in advance. Now, you don't want to come from a place of anger and frustration. And that's why I say have them in advance. If you can, set those boundaries ahead of time instead of when you're in the situation and you're feeling really uncomfortable and you're really upset. That is why I had you work through some of your shit and your emotions in advance. Because if you're going to have those conversations when your Aunt Julie or whoever comes and says, well, my gosh, you've put on some weight this year, then you're going to feel bad. You're going to feel maybe intimidated or, small or upset or teary or angry and explode. And you're not going to be able to communicate effectively. So you need to understand that these boundaries need to come from a place of love for yourself and kindness for yourself, but also because it's in the best interest of Aunt Julie or whoever is stepping on your toes so that you can nurture the relationship you have with her and bond over things that are much more important to you both instead of you just avoiding her, being angry with her, and setting an ineffective boundary. So you're going to have these conversations in advance if you can see it ahead of time from a place of love and kindness, not from a place of anger and frustration and being caught up in the moment. Once you're really clear on what outcome you want and what boundary you're setting, you need to be able to take responsibility. So here's what I mean about the boundaries are about you and not them. When you are establishing a boundary and you're communicating a boundary, you have to then decide what the consequence is going to be when somebody doesn't honor that boundary. So if you say, you know what, Aunt Julie, I am over conversations about my body. I am just not willing to have those conversations ever again. If I look great, cool. I already know what I look like. You don't need to compliment me. You don't need to size me up and tell me about my body. If I've gained a few pounds, I don't need to hear it from you. I don't need you judging my food. I don't need you monitoring my food. Go ahead and keep your eyes on your own plate. And the great thing about this is we can talk about your kids and your dog and your job and all of these other wonderful things. And I'm going to feel great about those conversations. That is the boundary, right? She does not have to then stop talking about the size of your butt. She can bring it up as often as she wants, but you have in advance decided that if this happens, you're going to walk out of the room. You're going to go outside and get some air. You're going to remove yourself from the conversation, or if it's in your home, you're going to ask her to leave, or you're going to ask her to, end the conversation in front of everyone, which might make her feel uncomfortable. You're going to call her out. So the consequence is very clear in your mind, and you have to take responsibility to then execute it. Am I making sense? I hope you guys are getting this. Explain how it feels when you're setting this boundary to have that boundary violated for you. So if that conversation comes up, just say, you know what, every time you talk about this, I know it's unfair to you that I haven't let you know in advance, but I always dread when you come over, and it's not because I don't love you and it's not because I don't enjoy your company. I do. It's just that I know you're going to be paying attention to my weight and that really bothers me, or you're going to be monitoring my food and that really bothers me. So I dread it. And I know that's unfair to you because I haven't even brought it up to you. So of course, maybe you didn't even know that it was happening. You can explain to her how you feel in that moment and not make it about her at all. In fact, you can say something along the lines of, I know that this has been a huge part of your life and it's something we've bonded over in the past. It's a conversation we've shared, the highs and lows and the multiple different diets and things in the past. And I'm just in a different place now. And so now these conversations feel inappropriate. Now they make me uncomfortable. And so I just don't want to be around them anymore. So if you want to bring them up, that's fine. But I'm going to leave the room if you do. And then leave the room if she does. You can send out a warning, right? Remember, Julie, we said that we weren't going to talk about this. I would like it if you would stop. But you don't get to decide whether or not she stops. You don't get to choose whether or not she honors that boundary that you set. Only you get to honor the boundary by getting your butt out of the chair and leaving the situation. And I know that's uncomfortable. I know that's hard to do. But the reality is you care enough about the relationship that you have with her to keep it pure, to keep it clean, to have a nice conversation and care about the things you both collectively care about. Talk about those things and not feel like you have to sit through another meal with her, through gritted teeth, through misery, through all of the struggle. You don't have to make it about her. You don't have to make it anything negative about her. You don't have to say, you know what, Julie, you really should just stop dieting. You really should just stop talking all of this diet stuff and this body stuff. And you're just such a nag and you all You don't have to shame her for her behavior. In fact, you should be talking to her in a way that is more loving and let her know that you do want to preserve the relationship. But also, when you're doing this, you need to be willing to accept that you may lose certain relationships, either permanently or for a time. As you are being more honest with yourself about what bothers you and you're setting those boundaries, you're going to struggle. It's going to be really hard in the beginning. But as you start to practice this, you teach people how to treat you. You teach people what you are willing to tolerate. And eventually those things just don't get brought up anymore. They just don't get brought up to you anymore. Of course, they can talk all they want behind your back. You have no control over that. But when you stop trying to control people and you start controlling your own circumstance, then you take your power back. Then you are empowered. The ball is in your court and you no longer have to suffer those conversations. Even if that means you're walking away from your holiday pumpkin pie so that you can go back to your hotel room and just, shake some of this off and give yourself some space because that's what you said you would do if she's brought it up. That's the consequence this year. But next year, you won't have to have the same conversation because the boundary has been established. They know you have your own back. They know you're going to execute the consequence. And the reality is they probably really want to spend time with you. And honestly, they would probably love to stop talking about diet and body stuff. They just don't realize that they do it all the time. And if they don't, there are consequences to behaviors. And that means that sometimes you'll set a boundary and they won't like it. And sometimes people will try to set a boundary with you and you'll find you don't like it. And that's okay too. You don't have to like the boundaries that are set with you as well. However, that person is loving you enough to let you know that something you are doing is upsetting to them. And you are loving your people enough to let them know that the relationship matters enough to you that you want to continue to be with them under every circumstance except for in the environment of when they are talking about your body or your food or their body and their food. There are two sides of the coin here. Of course, if you are not going to accept the criticisms and the food talk and things like that, then, if you are walking in with a banging body and you've reached your goals and you're really happy about it, you should also expect that they don't comment on your body at all, including during your successes, because that just sets a tone that body talk is acceptable in your presence. And the reality is you really can't have one without the other. It just sets a precedent that, it opens up that door. So I would rather you spend the time to really get clear about what is acceptable and what isn't, and close every door and don't make exceptions, not with yourself, not with others, because when you do, that teaches people that your boundary doesn't matter to you at all, or your boundary only matters to you when it's something that makes you uncomfortable and it's not something that is a personal value to you, which means that, you might just be uncomfortable in your body, but you're willing to talk about other people's bodies and you're willing to talk about your body when you like it, when in reality, the personal value really should be body talk is off limits. We have much more interesting lives than this. We don't have to go down the diet rabbit hole all the freaking time. So, wow, that was a lot. I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season that is full of personal boundaries and happiness and is stress-free because you've had the tough conversations that you need to have. You've gotten really clear about what's important to you, and you were able to let that be known and give yourself the strength to walk away from things that make you uncomfortable. If you liked this, please be sure to rate the podcast, leave me a review. It would be so cool if you did that. Screenshot it, tag me on social media at soulcenteredfitness.co. Of course, that's in the show notes. You can email me if you have a show idea, something you want me to cover. Make sure you shoot me an email. I'm always open to your ideas and your feedback. And you guys have a great day. Bye.